We're going to do a mini lesson on the scenario with Poland and the Czech Republic. So Poland and the Czech Republic, okay? So to begin with question 70, we are asked a question about absolute advantage, but the setup information we're given only talks about labor costs for producing coal and wheat. So how on earth do we get from labor costs to figuring out the answer? Well, the answer to how you do it is you convert the way the problem is set up to a diagram like we're used to. So how on earth do you transform the information about labor hours to the format we're used to? Well, what you're going to do is create diagrams, but to create diagrams you need to do the following thing. Step one is you need to endow each country with a total supply of labor hours. And then from that, you use the labor hours that are available and you use the conversion of labor into goods, and that gives you, for each country, a production possibility frontier. So before we endow each country with a total number of labor hours, how do we know how many labor hours to give them? So how many total labor hours to give each country? Okay. Well, the basic that's country there, the word country. The basic concept is you want everything to divide nicely. You want to divide nicely. So in this problem, you see that Poland requires 4 hours of labor to produce a ton of coal. So I put the number 4 hours of labor. It produces a ton of coal. 10 hours of labor to produce 10 bushels of wheat. So that's a 10-hour requirement to produce a certain amount of wheat. The Czech Republic requires 6 hours of labor for one good and 10 hours of labor for the other. So what you want to do is to endow each country so that those numbers divide nicely. And so we really only have 3 numbers, 4, 10, and 6. So what number divides nicely? What number divides nicely in a nice way? Well, here it is. So you've got 4, 6, 10. Well, obviously that implies if I give each country 60 labor hours to work with, I'll be able, through division, to get nice numbers. So I look at 4, 6, 10, I choose 60. If it was different, a different set of labor numbers, then I'd use a different endowment of labor. So, for example, not in your list of questions. Okay. Suppose you had a problem and the number of labor hours for one country to do one thing was it needed 3 labor hours to produce 1 unit of something, and it needed 7 labor hours to produce something else, and then there was another country and that one had a 6 and a 7. Well, if you sort of look at those 3 numbers, those numbers there, then if you gave each country 24 hours of labor to work with, all of your calculations will work out nicely. So we have then decided to move to a situation where each country is given 60 total hours. So we're going to give Poland 60 hours of labor and the Czech Republic 60 hours of labor. So in the case of Poland, its production possibility frontier looks like this. It's got 60 total hours, and this is Poland I'm talking about. All right, and in Poland it takes 4 hours to produce a ton of coal. So 4 hours to produce a ton of coal, 60 total hours. So that means at max, Poland could produce 15 units of coal. Okay, it's got 60 total hours. If all those hours were devoted to producing coal according to the way the question is written, the maximum amount of coal Poland can produce is 15, 4 hours per ton. And Poland requires 10 hours of labor to produce 10 bushels of wheat. 10 hours to produce 10 bushels, that means 1 hour to produce 1 bushel. So if Poland had 60 total hours and all of those hours went to producing wheat, then Poland could produce 60 units of wheat, max. So what we have now is we have the production possibility frontier for Poland. So what we've done is we have converted the sort of awkward statement of the problem in terms of labor hours. We've converted it into the familiar production possibility frontier diagram, and now we can work with that the usual way. And in a similar way, if you go to the Czech Republic, okay, then its diagram will look like this. It'll look like coal up there, wheat down there, and it will go from 10 to 60. So that gives you the production possibility frontier for the Czech Republic. And the reason is if the Czech Republic takes all of its 60 total hours of labor and it devotes that to producing coal, we know from the question, the way the question's written, 60 hours of labor. The Czech Republic requires 6 hours of labor to produce a single ton of coal. So 60 divided by 6 gives you 10. And when it comes to producing bushels of wheat, the Czech Republic requires 10 hours of labor to produce 10 bushels of wheat. So that's a ratio of 1 to 1 actually. 1 hour produces 1 bushel. The Czech Republic has 60 hours. So if all the Czech Republic does is produce wheat, it'll be able at the max to produce 60 hours of wheat. So now we have converted that strange sort of labor cost to production stuff into PPFs. So question 70 asks, which country has the absolute advantage in production of wheat? So which country can produce the most wheat if it puts everything into producing wheat? Well, actually, both of them will produce 60 units of wheat, so neither country actually has an absolute advantage over the other country, and that is why the answer to question 70 is C. What about question 71? Question 71 asks, which country has an absolute advantage in the production of coal? Well, all you have to do is look immediately at the diagram, and which country, devoting all its resources to coal, can produce the most coal. That's Poland. Poland can produce 15 units of coal. The Czechs can only produce 10. So the answer to question 71 is A. The Poles have the absolute advantage in the production of coal. Which country has the comparative advantage in the production of coal? Well, you can see that on the wheat axis, you're at 60 and 60, and we're asking about comparative advantage now. So since we're talking about comparative advantage, we're talking about slopes. Since the horizontal wheat axis is the same in each one, it's easy to tell immediately that Poland, when it comes to coal, it clearly has the steeper slope. Therefore, Poland has the comparative advantage in the production of coal. So the answer to question 72 is A, Poland. We're going to do question 73 now. Let me start over and do again the two diagrams, because again we are using our visual sense diagrams to answer questions. So Poland has 15 and 60. Oops. Okay. And that's connected that way. And the Czech Republic has 10 and 60. So the Czechs have same 60 point, but their intercept is lower down. Whoops, that's a pretty terrible line there. Okay. I don't like that line, so I think I'll make it a little bit sort of nicer and erase it. All right, so okay, so we're gonna go back to this and make the line better. Straight. Okay, still not great, but good enough. So our question is, which country has the comparative advantage in the production of wheat? And remember, wheat is always on this axis for both countries. So there's coal, there's wheat up there, right? So 73, which country has a comparative advantage in the production of wheat? Well, that's the country that has the slope that is flatter than the other one, because wheat is on the horizontal. So comparative advantage in wheat goes to the Czech Republic. So 73 is B. And it sort of has to be that way, because if one country has the comparative advantage in coal, the other country by definition has to have the comparative advantage in the other good, which in this case is wheat. So finally, what about question 74 and question 75? Well, actually, I won't ask you about those, and there's a reason why. Question 74 is a bad question, I realize, and the reason is the question 74 is asking you about opportunity cost. All right, opportunity cost. That's what question 4 is asking you about. But the information you are given is in terms of bushels of labor versus production of the real good of whichever sort, production of coal or whatever. And that's just too complex. When you ask a question and you've got the labor unit input in the fraction, but you're asking a question about opportunity cost and so forth, it's just too much. So to convert all the way to get the answer. So forget about question 74. Question 75 is an okay question, but it's too time consuming. It requires too much time to calculate the answer. And it's a respectable question. It's saying that if trade occurs, what are the upper and lower limits for the terms of trade, as we call it, when the two countries are trading wheat for coal? We can sort of say that the ratio at which they trade actually has to be in between the slopes of the two production functions. Let me put both countries on the same diagram. And if one country has a production possibility frontier like that, and the other country has a production possibility frontier like that, it happens that for the two countries to be able to agree on a trade where both will become better off, the terms of trade have to be somewhere in between those two slopes. The top slope, which is the trade-off for one of the countries, and the slope at the very bottom, that's the trade-off for the other. Well, for trade to be attractive to both countries, the two of them have to agree on a ratio of exchange or terms of trade that's in between the two lines, and that's all legit, but it's too much for a multiple choice question to be worth it. So there'll be no question like question 24 or question 74 or question 75. So let's do the Germany and China questions. And the Germany and China questions happen to be questions 19, 20, and 21 in the second document I sent. And these ones give you information about the transformation of labor into goods. And again, we want to convert that information into our production possibility frontiers. So we have some steps to convert this into production possibility frontiers. And the first step is to be clear, what does it mean to say the marginal productivity of labor with an asterisk for C, where C is actually cloth. Okay, what's MPLC actually mean? Well, that actually means how many more units of cloth you can produce if you increase your labor input. Okay, so if that delta L was like 1 hour of labor, then the delta C is how much extra cloth gets produced if you use one more unit of labor. And likewise, MPLB, where this is beer, is the change in beer divided by the change in labor. So if the delta L is 1, that means if I add 1 more unit of labor, how many more units of beer do I get? So these questions are actually using MPLC divided by MPLB. So what happens when you do that division? This is what you get. So MPLC divided by MPLB, is actually equal to delta C divided by delta L, all divided by delta B divided by delta L. So that means that MPLC divided by MPLB is, if we go to the right side, the delta L's cancel out. So what you're left with is delta C over delta B. So this delta C over delta B thing means that finally we have the information we need to draw a production possibility frontier, because change in C divided by change in B is telling you about the slope of the production possibility frontier for each country. It's telling you the rate at which one good, like beer, gets converted into the other good, cloth. And that's the essence of a production possibility frontier. So delta C over delta B is information that we are effectively going to be given. For Germany, we are told that that is 2 over 5. That's Germany. And for China, we are told that this sort of transformation ratio is equal to 1. So we'll draw production possibility frontiers using this information. Now, the China one will be really easy, because the China one, this is China, okay? The China one is a 1-to-1 transformation. So a 1-to-1 transformation means that in the case of China, it's just like a 45-degree line. If I give up 1 unit of beer, I gain 1 unit of cloth when I'm in China. So this is the China one, China production possibility frontier. The German production possibility frontier, I don't have quite as much room. The German production possibility frontier has this flatter slope. Beer, cloth, but it's a flatter slope. It's 2 divided by 5, or 2 on one, 5 on the other. China is like 1-to-1. So let me redraw those quickly. Okay. And then we can do the answer. There's Germany, there's China, and Germany is 2 over 5, 2, 5 for cloth and beer. And for China, it's really simple. It's just 1-to-1. Okay, that's actually meant to be 1-to-1 there for China. So question 19, what is the pattern of comparative advantage? Well, using that sort of visual sense, you know that if we're using the same scale on both, we can do comparisons, and one comparison we can do is comparative advantage can be read immediately. That there tells you that Germany has the comparative advantage in beer because of the flatter slope. China has the relatively steeper slope, so right away you know that China has comparative advantage in cloth. So the answer to 19 is B. B gives Germany the comparative advantage in beer and China the comparative advantage in cloth. Question 20 asks, what should China do? Well, China has a comparative advantage in producing cloth, so and for question 20, the answer is B. That's B. China specializes in cloth and exports it. There is a little bit of a hint here that they gave Germany beer as its product. So even if you knew nothing at all and you had to guess, you'd say, okay, I'll guess that Germany exports the beer and China exports the cloth. 21 flips it around, says what Germany should do. So Germany, we know, should specialize in beer production and exporting beer production, and that's option A in 21. 22 has nothing to do with any of this. It's just a question about what the real wage is. Real wage means if you take your dollars and convert them into real stuff, that's another way to estimate the value of your wage. That's all it means. So the answer to 22 is actually B. A worker's real wage is what the money wage will purchase in terms of products. And it really has nothing to do with the word marginal. It's sort of a little bit irrelevant here. Not totally. Well, let me just say, in the kind of models we're doing, it doesn't matter that the word marginal is there. The real wage just means what real stuff can you buy, and that means the answer to number 22 is B. And that's it for this video.